For more, we're joined now by Joseph Moreno. He's a former federal prosecutor, and he joins us this morning from Alexandria, Virginia. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Hillary. Great to be with you.
What do you make of President Trump's claim that he'll be arrested on Tuesday?
First off, Hillary, if I were advising Donald Trump, I would tell him to be very careful with these sort of call to arms type messaging that he's putting on social media, because as we all know, he's gotten in a lot of trouble for this before. As far as his claim that he'll be arrested, first of all, if he is charged up in New York, and I still think it's an if, there will not be this dramatic arrest or perp walk or mugshot that many of us who could be arrested, would suffer. Because Donald Trump is a former president, he enjoys Secret Service protection. So if there is some kind of an arrest situation, it will be much more discreet. He will make an appearance in court in New York City, but he will not be handcuffed. He will not be perp walked. It'll be a much less dramatic scene than what he's making out to be.
So still a lot of questions here, but something that we do know, of course, is that New York prosecutors have been investigating a $130,000 hush payment that Trump's former personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, made to porn actor Stormy Daniels. So tell me about that case and the possible charges we could maybe see against Trump.
So, Hillary, to the best of our knowledge, that's exactly what this grand jury in New York City is looking at right now. It's an older transaction. It's going back 7 years now, so there is a bit of a staleness factor here. But effectively, it's an accounting violation. It's basically that this money was diverted through Mr. Cohen, right, Donald Trump's lawyer at the time, to Stormy Daniels, which is not itself illegal, right? You can have non-disclosure payments to people. What is illegal is falsifying how you describe those types of transactions in your accounting books and records. Couple that with the fact that it was just days before the 2016 presidential election. So it combines not just a false accounting entry, but an effective campaign finance violation in basically the fact that it was a campaign donation disguised as something else. And so that's effectively what we think the grand jury is looking at. Not the most dramatic charges. It's a little dry, right? Except for those of us lawyers who are into this sort of thing. But it's still illegal, and it's still possibly what Donald Trump is facing right now up in New York.
If charges are laid, how do you think the case could unfold?
You know, Hillary, I think it's a tough case for a number of reasons. It's got two big procedural issues. One is that it's old, right? It goes back 7 years. And there are statutes of limitations that apply, which say prosecutors have a set time limit to bring cases. And so the prosecutors will have to get past the argument of why they think the normal 5-year bar on prosecutions should not stop this case. There's also, it's a bit of a complicated case in that you have to couple the accounting violation with a potential federal campaign finance violation to make it a felony. So that's a bit of a complicated argument that, to my knowledge, has not been made before in New York. So if the case survives those procedural issues and actually goes to trial, then you have the complicated point that the government's lead witness would likely be Michael Cohen, who is now a convicted liar in federal court, right? He's been convicted of perjury. So you can imagine Donald Trump's lawyers are going to be all over that, saying, how can you believe a liar who clearly has an axe to grind against my client? So I do think that the case is a tough one for prosecutors based on what we know right now.
And that's not the only investigation that the former president faces. So what else are prosecutors looking at?
That's right, Hillary. And actually, I think the other prosecutions that are out there are potentially more significant for Donald Trump. There's, of course, the investigations being run by a federal special counsel here in Washington regarding both the classified documents found at his home in Florida, as well as his participation in the January 6th riots. I think if either of those two cases are brought, they are potentially much more fraught with danger for former President Donald Trump. There's also a grand jury in the state of Georgia in Fulton County looking at Donald Trump's activities regarding whether or not he pressured Georgia voting officials in order to change the results of the 2020 election in that state. That's another potential serious case. So I would say in the spectrum of things, this New York case might be first in line, but I don't think it's the potentially most serious of all the different investigations Donald Trump is facing.
And Joseph, just finally here, and I don't have a lot of time left here, but no president, either one that's currently sitting in office or a former president, has ever faced criminal charges. There has been some criticism that maybe this isn't the case that prosecutors should use to try and go after the former president, that this could whip up his supporters, that it could lead to even more division. What do you make of that when people start kind of going down that road? What would be your rebuttal to that?
Hillary, I do not envy Alvin Bragg, who's the prosecutor in New York City, because he has to measure those exact factors, right? Does he follow a strict interpretation of the law and bring a prosecution regardless of who the person is, in this case, a former president? Or does he take into effect the bigger picture political scene, which is that it will enrage millions of Americans, possibly to violence up in New York City? So, tough situation. I don't envy him one bit.
Okay. Well, we will be watching to see what does happen this week. But for today, Joseph, thank you very much.
Thanks, Hillary. Good to be with you.
Former federal prosecutor Joseph Moreno.